Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We begin right on time around here, so let's get started. I'm Diane Michael with Beyond the Boardroom and Callan Group Communications, and I'm joined by my CAM partner, Lindsay Lombardi with Coastal Living Association Management and Dominion Management. Whether this is your first Webinar Wednesday or you've been joining us for months, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for investing your time and your professional growth into the communities that you serve. At Beyond the Boardroom, our mission is simple: to make quality education convenient, practical, and accessible for CAMs and board members. Whether you're joining us from your office, your home, or on the go, we're committed to bringing industry experts directly to you. Thanks to your incredible support, we've grown from one educational day every month to now offering free CAM continuing education on both the second and fourth Wednesdays monthly, along with our new monthly HOA board member education series. A special thank you goes to our friends at Martell and Ozum PA, whose continued support has made these new board member education opportunities possible. If you work with board members of HOAs, please keep an eye out for our newsletters and forward them to your boards. These sessions are designed to help board members make informed decisions, better understand their responsibilities, and strengthen the communities they serve. We're also excited to announce that registration is now open for our Get Credentialed 2026. It's a 2-day virtual education event designed to help all CAMs complete the courses that you need before the September 30th, 2026 renewal deadline. I'll be placing that registration link in today's chat. Those links include the full schedule currently. We're always adding to it. The course offerings and all the registration information. Please share them with your fellow CAMs, coworkers, and industry friends, all those last-minute people that are looking to get the credited hours that you need before that deadline approaches. We're giving you the credits next month. This education program is also underwritten by Martell and Ozum PA, and we're extremely grateful for their commitment to our program. Safe Sender. Okay, guys, make sure that you are adding our email newsletter to your Safe Sender list every week. If you're not receiving a weekly email from me, then it may be in your junk or your trash. So you're going to want to go to your folders and add that email to your Safe Sender list to be sure that you don't miss any important updates, as we are always adding more education to the calendar. You know, it could be this afternoon that we get an EH2 or an EH1 that you need and have been looking for. And the minute that we get it scheduled and we get it all packaged properly, we send it out. So be watching those emails. Finally, if you found value in Webinar Wednesday, the greatest compliment you can give us is a referral. Please tell another CAM, another board member, or another management company about our program. And as always, if you have vendors that you work with that are looking to get their information out to more CAMs, we would love for you to refer us. Lindsay, will you please explain how today's credits will work?
Sure. So at the end of the course today, we will give you the information and the link to go to our website. You will go to our website, enter your information, first name, middle initial, last name, into our registration form. It is different from the one that you did on Zoom, so please note that you have to do this in order to get credit. In there, you will also put the course name for the course taught today, which is the art of saying no. And then at the end of today's course, we'll give you a code word, and you're going to use that code word and enter that. And that's how we kind of can verify that you stayed during the course and you actually attended. So please make sure that you stay tuned so that you get that information so we can give you credit. If you don't have the code word, we can't give it to you later and we can't give you credit. The DBPR is pretty strict about us having a way to verify that people were here for the entire course, and that's the way that we're able to do it on Zoom.
Okay, guys, we have the chat that I'm going to open just for this. Any questions you want to put in Q&A, but I just open chat because we like to show our association allies where everyone is coming in from. So if you'll let us know if you're a board member, or if you're a CAM, and what city you're joining from today to show Eddie, we'd greatly appreciate it. I'll leave that open while I introduce our first presenter of the day. I'll also be putting the agenda for today into the chat after everyone tells us where they're coming in from. We today have one HR and 2 ELE. So stay for the whole day or just one course. We appreciate it. Okay, Azure Pool and Deck Design. Azure's president, Eddie Bone, began his career in the pool business fresh out of college when he was recruited to join the management training program at Pool Corp, a national chain of swimming pool distributors. He spent the next 9 years learning the business side of swimming pools, product sales, construction, and maintenance, moving with Pool Corp from Minneapolis to Georgia to ultimately Naples, where he became branch manager and sales center manager of SCP for Southwest Florida. At SCP, Eddie and his wife Kylie witnessed the joy and excitement a new pool and patio remodel can give homeowners and communities and decided to open their family business. Eddie also saw a lot of mistakes being made by contractors, a lack of communication and poor workmanship, resulting in expensive change orders for customers, which I'm sure all of you CAMs unfortunately can appreciate. That's why Azure offers 3D renderings of every remodel. So homeowners and CAMs and board members can fully visualize a project before construction starts or a remodel starts. Over the years, Eddie and Kylie have had the opportunity to meet and work with the best swimming pool contractors in Southwest Florida, recruiting only the most reliable and best at their craft for Azure Pool and Deck Design. I fortunately have been working with Eddie and Kylie for, gosh, I want to say over 5 years now. And they
Mhm.
truly are committed to their craft and to constantly educate themselves in ways in which to help support homeowners and CAMs and commercial properties all the time. Welcome, Eddie. We're happy to have you.
Good morning. Good morning. I was just scrolling through the chat there to see where everybody was from. I see a lot of people here from the Naples, Fort Myers area. I did get a question earlier about the areas that we service. So we service Southwest Florida, starting Fort Myers all the way down to Naples and Marco Island, and then we do Bonita Beach, Fort Myers Beach, and Sanibel. Um, our service area extends a little bit further with commercial projects, because those projects are typically bigger, so we can justify sending the crews out. But we are dedicated to taking care of all the CAMs that we work with. We attend the local COMA meetings for both Fort Myers and Naples. So if you're a part of that, make sure to say hi to Jason or Brian. They're typically there every month. We have taken the last 2 months off just because everybody's got families on vacation and things like that, so it hasn't always worked out. But we are very active in the commercial pool community and always here to answer questions, etc. If you guys have that. So, and I know Diane and I are going to leave some room at the end of my presentation for any kind of questions. So please, if things come up during the presentation, write them down, and I'm happy to go over the stuff at the end of the presentation today. Anyway, my name is Eddie Bone. I know Diane kind of gave my background. Got a pretty diverse background when it comes to the swimming pool industry. It was not what I pictured myself going into as a younger kid, but it was an amazing opportunity that I was presented with straight out of college to work with the world's largest pool and spa wholesale distributor, which allowed me access to lots of different manufacturers and, most importantly, product training when it comes to how things need to be built and how things need to be installed, which, at the end of the day, that is the meat and potatoes of all of these projects, right? It's how the manufacturer wants to see their product installed so that they can honor the warranty that they're providing you as a consumer. And that, I feel like, is where a lot of contractors mess that up. There's a lot of guys out there that have been doing the same thing for 30 years or so with family methods, etc. That's all well and good. The problem where lies in that if they are not following the instructions specified by the manufacturer, if there's ever an issue with warranty in the material, the warranty is going to get denied. So my training with all the manufacturers has really given me a unique perspective on how they want to see things handled, how they want things installed and order of operations in terms of when specific things need to be installed on the project. So it's been great. My wife and I started this company because we saw a dire need for transparency and honesty and just overall communication and workflow on projects. And we have not looked back. So today's presentation is all about the art of saying no, when CAMs should delay, decline, or redesign pool projects. I feel like the title doesn't necessarily describe the presentation exactly, so I wanted to give a little bit more context to what today's presentation is. Ultimately, you guys are the gatekeepers of your communities, and your community depends on you to be the financially responsible party, making sure you're bringing in the right vendors, making sure the projects are being handled correctly, et cetera. And, unfortunately, the expectation is that you're going to be the professional and know everything that's going on in these communities. And that's a really tough job. So when it comes to doing things like budgeting, et cetera, taking careful steps to cover your bases and protect your community is important. So what today's presentation is just kind of some guidelines of how to go about planning, budgeting, picking the right contractor, and the red flags to look at in terms of picking contractors. And then I've got a lot of photos of, well, what happens when you choose the wrong contractor? As a renovation contractor, we come behind a lot of really shoddy workmanship. A good install should last 10 to 15 years. Granted, most warranties from any manufacturer on a commercial installation is only 5. If that product is installed properly and maintained well, 10 to 15 years easily. If we were talking residential projects, a good installation that's maintained well should last 20 years. So, and that's way beyond any kind of warranty a manufacturer is going to offer. But that's why it's so important to pick the right person and make sure everybody's scope of work is all aligned. So we'll dive into this here and just go right into red flags. I'm going to start this out with a story of a recent situation that we had with one of our salesmen. He's my veteran here. He's been with me 5 years. And, prior to being with me, he had another 15 years in the field of doing swimming pool construction work. So his name is Jason. If you've seen him in the field or you've had him bid one of your projects, Jason is one of our senior employees and knows what he's doing and knows what he's talking about. But he had a project recently. We were approached by a CAM out of Naples. She had gotten 3 completely separate scopes of work, and the pricing was completely opposite ends of the spectrum. And, we had a very honest conversation with this CAM to the point where they allowed us to review the other contractor's bids because she was lost. Honestly, she was so frustrated. She had a board breathing down her neck about getting answers, and she really just needed somebody to help. And Jason's a really good guy, and like I said, we're always looking out for people and really wanting to just even if we don't get the job, I feel like it's our job to help grow our industry and help our community because we're a big part of it. But anyway, so 3 completely different scopes of work. So Jason spent a good half of a day diving into every single person's proposals to just kind of filter through. And what we found out is there was a lot of vague wording in the scopes. And unfortunately, when you've got a vague project scope, what that opens the door for is tons of change orders down the road. And we see it all the time. the board sees the low number. It's so attractive because they're trying to maintain budgets and they're trying to keep the community happy. And so they choose that low number. And the downside is once the project gets going, well, that low number was just a bait and switch. That was to get in the door. They already saw every other problem going on in the swimming pool, and they left the vagueness of their project scope to be able to change order the communities to death. I'm not saying that change orders on a renovation project shouldn't be expected because honestly, especially given the commercial environment and the number of bodies that are in those swimming pools, the damage is pretty severe. But if you plan things correctly and you take the proper steps up front, you should at least be prepared to expect a lot of what may come down the pipe. Nothing should be an all-out surprise. So, going over those scopes of work and realizing that, they're very vague in their descriptions of what are being done, et cetera, and then the other part is, that vagueness can leave room for things that they just don't intend on doing. And like I said, that goes back to the manufacturer installation guidelines, right? So if we're not following those procedures as outlined in the guidelines of the manufacturer, then there's no warranty. And Florida's interesting in how they let people use each other's licenses, et cetera. So you may get a company that's popped up, within the last 6 months that's paying to use somebody else's license. It's not their own license. So if they burn bridges, guess what? They close their doors and they're gone. So, we've got to be very careful on the front end and look for those red flags. And one of the things that we can do to prepare ourselves for handling a project of this size would be to get professionals involved. You can see the bullet point up there says lack of engineering or professional reports. And what I'm talking about is assigning a professional to oversee the project scopes, similar to how Jason did for one of our clients. Going through the project scopes, making sure that they all line up, and then putting together a real RFP for these contractors to follow. Because if you've got an RFP on the front end and a detailed scope that they have to follow, it's going to cover your bases on the back end. So having an engineer or another pool professional that is not necessarily bidding on the project that can review these for you is huge. And that is actually something that we are working on here, is putting together a partner program where we can work with CAMs to help filter through proposals, put together RFPs, do pool inspections, et cetera, so that you guys have a better idea of what to expect on a pool. And it would be from somebody that's not necessarily benefiting from the contract itself, which I think is good. The other thing, and this is a lot of what happens during the sales process. The sales guys that are out there talking to you, talking to the board members, are a lot of them out there will promise the world. And a lot of that promising, when it comes to commercial pools, is a timeline. Because as we all know, at least in Southwest Florida, I know some of the northern areas are less so, but at least down here during the summer, this is our time to get commercial pools done because all the residents are back up north, or at least a majority of them are. And so we've got a very short window to get these projects done before residents come back so that people can enjoy swimming in the pool and the bulk of your community isn't having to wait. So, giving an unrealistic timeline in terms of permitting, in terms of the actual build process. And that should include, hey, well, what happens if this happens? So if XYZ happens, that's a possibility in my project, how much time is that really looking at adding to the overall process of the project? And then the last part of the timeline is at the end of every commercial resurface and residential resurface, we have what's called the startup period. That is the 28-day window after water has been put in the pool that you are not allowed to swim. And those rules are specified by the National Plasters Council. And the National Plasters Council is the governing body for all the pool interior finish. That's the bottom lining of the pool. All the manufacturers that make that product use the National Plasters Council guidelines in terms of how to warranty their finish. So if we don't follow their startup procedure properly, meaning no swimming for 28 days while maintaining proper water chemistry, guess what? If you have issues on that pool, the manufacturer may ask for your chemistry records. They may ask when you opened that pool, when was the pool refinished? And those are all important questions which will ultimately determine whether or not a manufacturer is going to cover your warranty. Missing or unclear funding sources. Honestly, if the guys are, showing up in beat up work trucks, etc., they're not maintaining their vehicles. You've got people coming out to the jobs that are wearing, whatever. They're not company uniforms. It's something you should question, because that's the kind of stuff where when something happens on the project, is this company going to be here to stand behind the project when it's done, right? So, just things to look at. And I added a couple of things to this slide. Improper licensing. So again, Florida's kind of unique. The state of Florida says that you need a CPC or RPC license in order to resurface or remodel a commercial swimming pool. Those are state licenses. However, depending on your county or city, and if you have questions about your county licensing requirements, I do recommend that you reach out to your county officials to find out exactly what they are, because I only know what our current area requires. But for instance, like Cape Coral, you're not required to pull a county permit when you resurface a pool. However, Naples, Fort Myers Beach, Bonita Beach, Estero, Marco Island, all of those areas are all required to pull a county permit. Well, outside of, the permit just being a record for the county of when the work was done, that is also a background check on the company. Does the company have the right license to do the job? Are they skilled enough to do the job? And when I say skilled, I mean that these counties require these licenses because the state has vetted these companies that they meet all the criteria to do the job. And let me dive further into that. In order to get a license in the state of Florida, you have to pass 2 extremely comprehensive 4-hour-long exams, much like many of you have had to take for your own licenses, and you have to get a C or better. So if they don't have the proper license, means they couldn't get a C on the exam. And this, the C is the bare minimum. And there's a lot of companies out there that are operating without licenses. And thankfully, I have heard that Tallahassee is really going to start cracking down within this next year with task forces, et cetera, on unlicensed activity. But until that happens, there's still a lot of people out there that are working without licenses, or at least the improper license. So like in Cape Coral, if you're not careful, you may sign up with a contractor. Maybe he's the guy that's taking care of your pool, right? And all he has to have to take care of your pool for the Department of Health is a CPO license, which is just an operator's license, meaning that he's got a license to maintain your pool and put chemicals in it. That doesn't mean that he's got a license to do the work on the pool itself. That would have to be done by, again, somebody with a CPC or an RPC license. So making sure that, you're asking for those credentials up front, and along with that, the proper insurance coverages. More and more, we are finding just the crazy stuff that people do out there to pull the wool over people's eyes. We had one recently where a contractor and we came behind, but a contractor had signed up for an insurance policy only to get the job, only to then, after getting the job, canceling the policy. So they did it long enough to get insurance certificate to provide to get the project and then canceled it after. It's beyond me how these people do this kind of stuff. I don't know how they can sleep at night, but these are all the things that, are on the front end. So, making sure they've got the proper insurance coverages and not bare minimum. I mean, do they actually have a realistic policy where if something happened on your project, you would be covered? And then, I don't have it on here, but asking for trade references. Name some other communities that you've done work with. Can we call those CAMs? Can we call those board members? Do you have a reference list? Going by reviews online anymore is just hard to believe. You can pay any company to go and post false reviews on your Google and Yelp and everything else, but if you give a realistic trade reference sheet where you've got communities you can call and customers you can call, tell me about your experience. Were they on time? Were they on budget? Did you have surprises? How was their communication, et cetera? These are all things when you're vetting these companies, especially when, maybe you're down to the final three, it's a good way to cover your bases. So what can happen when you don't? Vague project scopes. You can see here, this pool had the old Spanish tile, and this is a pool out on Fort Myers Beach. This is the original pool. This pool is 30 years old, right? This is the original Spanish tile from 30 years ago that was never removed before installing their new tile. And you can see you've got calcium coming through there because you don't have proper adhesion, which means that water's getting up behind this tile. And it's just overall in bad shape. Same pool here. This was their attempt to raise the beam on the outside of the pool. You can see they did put steel in there, but right underneath that steel, and there was no pins into the actual structure itself. Pins are an attaching point where we drill into concrete and we use a concrete setting epoxy to hold the steel in place. But this steel was laid, they laid it right on top of the old Spanish ceramic tile on the top and then poured new concrete on top. All of that concrete shifted and moved because it wasn't adhered properly. And they poured concrete and then they covered it. Well, guess what? It failed. Same pool, again, like I said, 30 years. This was over the 30 years, how far the fittings had been built out. We removed, it's hard to tell here, but that's almost 2 inches of material on this pool here because the contractors kept putting layer upon layer upon layer. Here's the deal. When it comes to resurfacing a pool, every pool finish manufacturer out there says that after you have 1 layer on a swimming pool, when you're resurfacing, you can apply up to 1 more layer, which means you can have a max of 2 layers of finish on a swimming pool before you have to chip it back to a shell. Doesn't matter if there's delamination or not. That's just how their warranties are written. The likelihood of delamination to happen with multiple layers is extremely high. So, and if people are not understanding what I'm saying, when I'm saying layers, essentially they are applying a 1/4 to 1/2 inch thick coat of our pool bottom material. And then when they go to resurface, they're, rather than removing that, they are applying another 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch thick material on top of it. Now, if there's only 1 layer present, that is fine. As long as they use a proper bonding agent and prep procedures, that is totally fine and well within your warranty for what you can expect on the job. If there is more, if you have 2 existing layers, guess what? Those layers have to come out. So that should be included in your proposal, is the removal of those 2 layers. And I know not all, you don't always know how many layers have been in there, especially if you've maybe recently moved into the community and they haven't kept records properly. I know it's tough to know those answers up front. However, one thing you can help yourself with is making sure that if those layers are present and they find it after draining, that you know the cost to remove those and dispose of those so that it's not a surprise in the middle of the job. So like I said, that's kind of going back to the prepping on the front end, hiring professionals, et cetera, making sure scopes of work align. So part of the preparation is reviewing budgets, doing reserve studies, and the best way to do that, again, is to hire a professional, whether it be a civil engineer or another pool professional. Civil engineers are good in that they can give you a realistic idea of how long a project or product should last. What they may struggle with is a realistic idea of what the work is going to take and the costs involved to do that work. So hiring, like I said, a representative, a pool representative that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the project itself, but putting together what a realistic budget would look like for a project, maybe the year or two before you're ready to go into doing the project so that you guys can budget properly. The other thing that is important to do on the front end would be annual inspections. And I know, Diane, correct me if I'm wrong, is Will on after me today with aqua leak detection?
Yes, he is.
Okay. So taking a company like Aqua Leak Detection or another good leak detection company to come out and do a leak detection on an annual basis to identify any problem areas. Because guess what? You all have autofills on your commercial pools. They are required by law to have those on your pool. So you are constantly filling that pool. And leaks always begin small, right? But the longer they go undealt with and unnoticed, the bigger they get and the more damage they cause. So doing things like annual leak detections and pool inspections so that you can catch things at the beginning rather than after they've already wreaked havoc on your pool is extremely important. Shout out to Will at Aqua Leak Detection. He does all of our pre-construction leak detections. We do pre-construction leak detection before we do any kind of remodel project. It gives everybody a clear picture of what is going on with the pool's plumbing and the pool's shell integrity before the water is drained out of the pool. And the reports are great. They've got photos and they let you know the areas that you need to focus on, and not everything that is going to show up in that report is going to be visible to the naked eye. It really takes somebody spending, and on some of your pools that are huge, hours and hours and hours, or a full day diving and swimming and just checking these areas to make sure, hey, we don't have problems going on. So doing those things on the front end will help you on the back end in terms of budgeting, bringing down overall project costs, repair costs, et cetera, and eliminate surprises. Special assessments, timing to do the projects. You guys all know the best times to do projects in your area. I know it's unique to everywhere in Florida. Not everybody has the same, dare I say, seasons here. I know Southwest Florida down here, I feel like we have summer, super summer, rainy season, and hurricane season. And then we've got a little window of really beautiful weather. But finding that optimal time in your schedule to get these projects done is important. And obviously, along with that, the budgeting side of things, does it make sense to budget this item so that it's allocated in the budget, or do we need to look at doing a special assessment to the community? It's a big project. We've got a lot going on, et cetera. You guys know what's going on in your community, but planning on the front end so that you're not caught, in the headlights of a project in the middle of it is really important. Then, especially with the economy that we have had lately, inflation and material cost fluctuations. I'm just going to be real. Costs never go down. In my years and years in this industry, both in the construction side and in the manufacturing and distribution side, I have never seen costs go down. So when you're doing these reserve studies, when you're getting these estimates, talk to the people performing these for you. okay, how long is my estimate good for? Most people's estimates, when they write them, there's a clause at the bottom that says this, and most of them are good for a day, like 10 days, 30 days, but most don't exceed that, and that's how, us contractors have to protect ourselves. It's not like anybody's trying to do anything dishonest, but in the market that we're in now, especially after things like, COVID, et cetera, we've seen fluctuations in material costs and labor costs up to 40%. And during COVID, at one point in time, we had a 45% price increase over a 3-month span. So it's a very unique market. Granted, things have really leveled out. Hopefully, we don't see all of that in the future. But again, cover your bases. Make sure you're reading the contracts properly. You're asking the questions, how long are my prices good for? What can we expect, in terms of price increase if you're bidding this year versus next year? I know nobody can forecast the future, but I would say on average, a 10% price increase this year versus next is probably pretty realistic. But again, have those conversations. And then phasing the projects. So depending on your project size, maybe you're just doing a resurface. But if you're doing a massive project, maybe you're doing a resurface, you're adding an outdoor kitchen, you're adding more decking space, you're doing lots and lots of changes, phasing that project so that you have the least amount of downtime for your community, and maybe they can enjoy it in the meantime while you're doing different, parts of the work is important. So it's all about planning on the front end and keeping your community informed. This is a example of a customer that we worked with. See, we started with this customer August 22nd, 2025. We didn't end up signing. Sorry, we ended up applying for the permit in September 2026, but the delivery of materials and everything didn't happen till months later. So talking to the people that you're working with about realistic timelines so that everybody knows what's going on, because not every material is available up front. I know for a lot of you, you'll have your committees, your individual committees that will do your color selections, and those people are out of town and they can't come back for meetings and they have to be here to pick this, this, and this. Make sure you're having those conversations with your contractor up front. Make sure that those conversations are getting relayed to your board and maybe sending letters out to your community, because your community doesn't know that so-and-so from the color selection committee can't come down for 2 months, which means that you can't pick materials for your job for 2 months. And again, if they pick materials and those materials aren't readily available by your start date, guess what? Your start date gets pushed back. So making sure that you've got all of those answers up front is huge in communicating to all the residents in your communities. Risks of rushed approvals kind of goes back to what I was talking about. Rushing through color selections, rushing through the initial contract signings and selecting a contractor up front, ultimately ends up in disputes on warranty because vague scopes of work. Again, contractor selection mistakes, resident dissatisfaction from delays. All of this stuff just trickles down. And unfortunately, UCAMs take the brunt of it. Like I said, we work with a lot of them, and we try and communicate and over-communicate as much as possible so that you guys can communicate to your residents and let them know what's going on. The more your residents know about on the project, the less that they're guessing and complaining about and going on the neighborhood Facebook page and complaining to everybody in the communities about it, which obviously I know you've all dealt with. And then worst case scenario, legal exposure from poor documentation, and that could be on either the contractor side or your side. making sure that you're picking the right person, that the scope of work is not vague, et cetera, so that you don't have a nasty fire to put out at the end of a project. Here's some more pictures of just improper installs we found over the years. You can see there was 3 inches of material we removed on this pool. This was one out on Sanibel, 3 inches of material. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of finish in this pool. The top 3 were all delaminating. We let the CAM know because we were pretty sure there was at least 2 layers, and we gave pricing for the removal of those 2 layers, as well as a price to remove any additional layers found. So that CAM was well equipped to go back to her board and her residents and know exactly what's going on in the project, the exact costs involved, so no surprises, right? The only surprise was obviously the additional layers, but when the additional layers were found, they already had the answers that they needed in terms of, do they need to be removed? Yes, they do. What's the cost? They already had it. It was in the scope. And all of these photos, we are actually sending to our CAM partners. We use a operating system called Buildertrend. It is a construction management software. Any professional company should be running a construction management software. What it's great for is communication, organization, and transparency. It lets everybody know what's going on. If a CAM writes an email in our communications software, it goes to everybody on my team, regardless if the salesperson sees it or the field super or myself or Kylie or Julie. We all see it, and we all cover the messages that come through, get back to people quickly, answer questions quickly. But these are all the markings of a solid company. These are the kinds of companies that you want to do business with. You know, when you've only got the cell phone of the crew leader, it kind of leaves you in a pickle when the crew doesn't show up and you can't get a hold of anybody, and you've got residents standing outside the fence looking at a pool that's completely empty with nobody working on it. So again, upfront, asking the right questions. How do you run your projects? Who's my point person? How are we going to communicate, et cetera? All things to know on the front end. Again, this job here, this one's in Fort Myers. This was a rushed project. They signed a contract with a company. They didn't do the proper prep work on the pool. And what you see here is delamination. Delamination means that this layer of finish is not mechanically bonded, meaning sticking to the concrete layer underneath. If I were to zoom in right here, you'd actually see that there is a layer of tile underneath here as well. So no tile was removed. Here's another photo, same pool. There was 3 layers of tile here around the pool, both the water line, the gutter, the steps. It was just a mess. Again, you guys are the gatekeepers. Learning how to balance board and vendor influence is a serious gift. You know, not getting pushed too far one way by the board. And I know you work for the board, but you also, as a duty to the board, need to provide them the information that's going to help them vote and make the decisions that they need to. Hey, I know you guys are really leaning towards this contractor. However, there were some red flags that came up for me when I read their proposal, when I looked into their company, when I called around a little bit, and I really think that we should reconsider. And if you've got a bunch of those candidates, maybe time to send it back out for more bids. Don't feel rushed to sign a contract because the storm on the back of that project by signing the wrong person or not doing the due diligence on the front end is going to be way worse than pushing the project for another year or 6 months or whatever you need to do to make sure you've got the right people doing the project. Again, managing expectations. This portion of it, I'm specifically talking to managing the expectations of the board and the residents of the community. And that means asking the right questions up front. You know, letting the board know, hey, this project construction is going to take a month. after the construction is done, we've got another month with no swimming. I'm going to send an email out to the community letting them know the pool will be closed from this date to this date. And should anything change, we'll update communications and let everybody know. That way your communication is set up front. We live in a gated community. I have been on the resident side of the project, watching the wrong contractor get hired in our own gated community, watching the CAM just kind of fumble through it, just taking the contractor's word every single day that, oh, there's only so many days left. And that went on for weeks and weeks. And half of it was because the contractors weren't showing up. And, ultimately, a lot of issues down the road. So this hits home for me as a resident and a contractor that, we want to make sure that you guys are successful. Nobody wants to make your job difficult. So anything that we can do to help make your job easier, that's what we're here for. Ensuring due diligence is completed, that all goes into your planning. And then obviously same thing, planning, protecting your fiduciary responsibility. This is a screenshot of our project management software. Through our software, we can actually send the communications from our team to your team. And that means more than one email. And that doesn't mean we have to CC in everybody. That means that I can set any number of people up as contacts, meaning special committees, board members, etc., up so that every single communication goes to every single member and you're not stuck in the middle having to relay messages all the time. They can read the messages themselves. Like you can see, here's a daily log from our project, the notes of that daily log, which goes out to everybody, and 28 photos of what's going on that day at the pool that they can review, that go along with the notes to keep everybody informed. This is the kind of level when you're running a community that you should expect from your contractor. If they are not putting up this level of effort and communication, it is a red flag. Bottom line, if they cannot communicate like this to make your job easier, it is a red flag. I do not care what their price is. It is a red flag. These are who you want working for your community. Talking more about the communication, things like we call those daily logs or daily reports. But, language sent out to the community residents or board members or committee members about any kind of delays the moment they happen. The faster we let you guys know, the faster you can let your community know. Documenting decisions in your minutes for your board meetings. And again, all of the people, at least through our system, have access to all of those. They can pull those up in board meetings. They can review during board meetings with the community. Here's photos of the pool being done. Here's all of this going on. It helps answer those questions for the residents. Everybody wants to know, when are we going to swim? Well, the more information you have, the better idea you can give them of when that can happen. Communicating residents and handling vendor pushback. Handling the vendor pushback, that part goes back to getting those RFPs, right? Making sure you have a clear, defined scope of work for everybody you're bidding on the front end so that if things come up on the project, you have a clear way that those things will be handled. Not, an argument over a week of how something's going to be handled. Everything's clear on the front end so that when things come up on the project, we already know what the decision's going to be and how it's going to be handled. That's how projects run smoothly. And again, if you're getting handfuls and handfuls of bids on the front end and none of them line up, maybe it's time to put together a good RFP, a detailed scope of work, get that engineer, get a pool company to come out and inspect the pool. Hey, if you were going to remodel this pool, what would you do? And give me a rough idea of cost, right? Pay them for their time. Pay them for their time. How much would it cost me to get a realistic estimate for an inspection of this pool? And you could combine this, you could hire a leak detection to do part, and you could hire the pool contractor to do the other part. And that way, you've really got a full scope of what's going on with the pool. The other thing to look at would be getting your Department of Health representative out to your property. Again, if you exceed 32 doors, you have to register with the Department of Health. So getting that Department of Health representative out on site, or your county, and they are different. The DOH and your county inspectors are completely different, and they will both have to inspect your project. But getting them to come out and look at things like, hey, does my electrical need upgrading? On the Department of Health side, do I need to update my pool rules? Do I need to do this and that to make sure we're compliant, so that at the end of the project, you guys can open back up right away? Because guess what? Construction could be completely done. You could be completely done with startup. Your pool could be full of water. It could be ready to swim. But guess what? If you don't get the stamp of approval from the Department of Health or the county representative, that pool is not opening. Bottom line. They will not open that pool, which means your residents will stare at a full pool that they can't swim in. So if you can catch that on the front side and get those reps out from the county and the Department of Health, much better chance of opening on the backside. And then just talk to your contractor. What should I look at to prolong the life of this pool? Long-term maintenance. How do you want to see this pool balanced? And that all boils down to what the manufacturer requires. Most manufacturers require documented chemistry readings, which as a commercial pool, especially if you're over 32 doors, you already have to provide that to the Department of Health. However, the readings that the Department of Health require are less than what the manufacturers require in terms of what those chemistry readings are. So just make sure you know the difference. All right, so I have gone over a lot, but I wanted to leave room for questions. So Diane, do we have any questions?
We do. Okay, lots of good intel. Also, everyone, we at the end will put Eddie's contact information into the chat. It will be on the screen. If you want a copy of this presentation, you can contact Eddie directly, or also we will put a link in the chat on where all of the videos from all of the presentations that we post, so you can share with your board members and fellow CAMs. Okay, first question is, what are your thoughts on Fribro technology to resurface a pool? Fribro.
Yeah, I'm reading that. I am not sure what that is.
Okay.
I can take a stab at it. What I would imagine that is, there are some companies out there that produce a coating that goes on top of concrete. I've seen it done in both fiberglass, and there's a new product out that I call them fads. We've seen the same product kind of come up and disappear. I've seen it come up at least 3 times in my career, where they will come up with this new finish system. Right now, I think it's called Eco Finish, and it's essentially like a fiberglass coating that goes over the interior of a pool. My opinion on it, I can only give you what I've experienced when I come behind them when they fail. I would say any fad technology, you should be hesitant to do. Most of them have not had a lifespan long enough to be proven, and I sure wouldn't want to test it on a massive pool. We've seen them fail in residential pools. Now, fiberglass pools as a whole are great. There is nothing wrong with fiberglass pools. They're easy to maintain. They last a long time, etc. These coatings that I've seen people put over the concrete, I'm really hesitant to recommend that. And we've had those reps come through here. Oh, don't you guys want to become, vendors of ours? We would love if you put our product in. I'm sorry. I'm very set on the tried and true methods that I have seen last and last and last over my tenure in this industry.
I like it. Okay, next question. Would it be wise to obtain a performance bond for major projects? I actually wrote that down. That's a really good question.
I would say it depends on the project. and ultimately what the insurance coverages are from the contractor anyway. If you are actively concerned that they are not going to perform their scope of work, then I would question why that person's being hired.
That's true. Next question. Can subsurface stains be addressed without draining the pool, i.e. scuba divers scrub stains by hand? Kind
Scuba
of like a
divers, no.
service
Um,
question.
there are chemical treatments that you can do without draining the pool to remove stains. It really depends on the type of stain, how deep it is, and how much there is on the actual effectiveness of the stain removal. There is a project or process called a no drain acid wash. Um, I would not recommend it on an older surface. What a no drain acid wash is, essentially, you turn that body of water into an acid bath, a mild acid bath. And what you're doing is you are removing a layer of cement from the surface. You're physically going to remove part of that layer of cement from the surface. It's no different than a drain and acid wash where they're going to do the same thing. The difference is the water stays in the pool. So when they're all done doing this acid wash, they have to balance the water. Here's the thing. When you do that, you cannot run that water through your equipment. The equipment has to be shut down, bypassed. Independent pumps need to be put into the pool to do it so that it doesn't damage heaters, any kind of rubber gasket, which can be found in your pool pumps, can be found in your control valves, can be found in your filters. Metallic items like your heat exchanger, whether you have geothermal or gas or heat pumps, your heat exchangers can get damaged by that acid water passing through them. So if they're going to do a method like that, you have to shut all the equipment down and run external pumps on that pool to turn that water over to get it done. And then, yeah, then it's people scrubbing and doing whatever. I will tell you they are expensive, especially on large bodies of water, because we're talking a lot of acid, a lot of scrubbing, and multiple auxiliary pumps to turn that body of water over. So on a finish that's maybe a couple of years old that doesn't have any issues on a leak detection report or visible issues in the pool finish itself, great candidate. If it's over a couple of years old, no, not worth it. You're actually going to weaken that finish. You're going to shorten the lifespan. If there are or have been leaks that have been epoxied in the pool or active leaks, guess what? That acid water likes to get in those leaks. It'll degrade that epoxy around those repairs. It'll open up holes bigger. Maybe what was a pinhole now becomes bigger. Maybe now it's the size of a pencil. Guess what? A leak the size of a pencil in a swimming pool is thousands of gallons a day of water loss. So I would just be leery. If it's beyond a couple of years old, don't do it. If it's within a couple of years, I would really want to know what the stain is and how it got there. And is this really the best method for handling it? Or is there something else going on that maybe we should be looking at?
Hey, I like it. We are gonna just run through the eval. We're not gonna do it, but if you can just go through like each just one, two, three, and then that way everyone can just see the questions. The evaluation, we really, we know that you're paying attention, so we just kind of put out some good questions that we know that everybody has the answers to, but we're running out of time, so we're just going to go right to the end of the contact page so everyone can take a picture of Eddie's contact information. I'm also going to put into the chat his link to his website where you can learn more about the services that they provide. There was a question in the chat. If you service the Palm Beach area So I just recommend reaching out to Eddie directly because he is involved with the Florida Swimming Pool Association and knows the really good contractors in the state of Florida. So he may be able to point you in the right direction. Eddie, thank you. Another informative course.
And beyond that, to that last question, beyond that, we are actually working on a program right now to work with CAMs as a representative, as somebody that you can have as a
Oh, I love that.
professional come
Mhm.
in, work with you, whether it be just during your RFP process or as an active project manager and overseer of the project. And that means working through change orders, just having that professional on your side during the project that can help you make sure you're not being taken advantage of by contractors.
I love it. Thank you, Eddie. We'll let you get back to it and
Yep.
we'll go over the how to get credits. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will see you next month.
There's the course number and course license. I saw your